So we're going to pick that back up. License law is something we always do in pieces because it is sort of overwhelming to do it all at one time. But this is slide number 32 in that license law package is kind of where we're starting. It says, what does it take to be active? And we're not talking physically active here. We're talking about the status of active. This is North Carolina real estate license law. So what section of the exam are we studying for right now?
This national.
Really?
No. North Carolina. This is
all North Carolina.
State, yeah.
This is the state section of the exam that we're studying for. And so this is the slide number 32 in there.
Is it really?
Discussion of where you need to be in order to be on an active status. You got to get these statuses nailed down in your brain.
I need to go back over that.
Licenses have different statuses, and they're going to ask you questions on the test about the different license statuses. Just because you have a real estate license does not mean you can actually use that real estate license. Not every status is created the same. Not every status allows using them at all times. And so we want to talk about the status that does allow. And the status that allows for use of the license is active status. Active status is the status that allows for use. If somebody wants to use their real estate license, this is where they need to be. And especially if they want to get paid. Here's what they're going to test you for right away on the test. You cannot, as a real estate licensee in North Carolina, whether you are a firm or a broker, you cannot be paid for real estate activities that you did when you were inactive. I'm going to say that again. You cannot be paid for real estate activities you did if you were on inactive. What's the opposite of active status? Help me out. What's the opposite of active status? Inactive status. And so if you are inactive, you cannot be compensated. Do you still have a real estate license?
Yes.
Yes, you do. But it is not in the status that allows you to be compensated. Now, notice, and this is where you have to really pay attention to what I'm saying. This is super important. You can learn all the, here, let me ask you a question. Do you want to fail the exam over something stupid? After you've done all this hard work, learning all these hard concepts, after you've beaten yourself to death with agency, do you want to fail the exam over just not memorizing license statuses?
No.
Because you absolutely will fail the exam for not memorizing license statuses. They throw a bunch of this crap in there. And people tune it out. Well, that's so boring. It is. But you need it to pass. And so if you don't listen to the way I'm presenting this, you will fail the exam because of this silly stuff here. Did I say you had to be on active status to get paid? Is that what I said?
Yes.
That is not what I said. Not what I said. Not what I said.
Be active to be compensated.
That's not what I said.
No, when you do the job, you was active. When you can
say
become active and then collect.
Again, Carlos, because it's very discreetly different, but it's different. What did I say? I said, in order to be compensated, you have to be active when you do the work. So I'm going to ask the question again. Do you have to be active to be paid? The day you're paid, do you have to be active?
No.
You have to be active the day you did the work. You're being compensated for work you did while you were what?
Active.
In this business, don't we often get paid for things much later after we did the work?
Yeah.
I mean, if you
Yep.
think about a normal real estate transaction, aren't we often compensated far down the road
Yes.
after we do the work?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that we were on active status when we did all the work, and something has happened between now and then that made us inactive, but we could still be paid for the work we did while we were active?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because what you would say is, well, you should pay me for that because I had my license was active then and I was doing the work, so I should be paid for that. There's nothing wrong with paying somebody who's on inactive status if you were paying them for work they did when they were active. Does that make sense for everybody? And I know it's a very narrow difference, but it's the kind of difference they test you on. Now, Kate said something over there that concerns me. That said, no, if you're a PB. Talk to me,
I'm
Kate.
sorry, I'm really slow this morning. I had a long night with the baby, so I heard you completely wrong. So totally disregard that.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure, because here's what I don't want to have as a misconception. Can a provisional broker be compensated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Work for a broker.
absolutely, as long as they're on what status?
Active.
Active status. No question about it. Can a provisional broker do pretty much any type of real estate they want to do that their broker in charge is willing to supervise them doing?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
they can. Very limited exceptions like property management. But for the most part, they can, provisional broker, the day your license comes in the mail, you can go sell property if that's what you want to do. And if you got a broker in charge willing to supervise you. Okay. No, you're fine, Kate. I just wanted to make sure you were not off in la la land because it's easy enough. I think sometimes people think provisional broker can't do anything. You can't do anything until you take post licensing. Well, that's wrong. You can. The whole point of being a provisional broker is you're supposed to go out there and practice while you're provisional and get some experience while somebody's supervising you. Okay. So let's talk about what it takes to get to this status of being eligible for compensation, active status. The first one right here, this is a big one on the test. A provisional broker cannot be active unless they have who to supervise them?
Broker in charge.
Okay.
Broker in charge. So here's how they're going to ask the question on the test. This is how they're going to ask the question on the test. When a license is first issued, what is its status? That's the question they're going to ask. And what's the answer to that question?
Inactive.
It
Inactive.
is inactive. Because when it's first issued, what kind of license is it?
Provisional.
It's provisional. And if it was first issued and it's provisional, have they had a chance to get a broker in charge yet?
No.
Nope.
No, you can't have a broker in charge until you actually have a license. So when your license is first printed, hot off the presses, it comes to you in an inactive state. Does that make sense for everybody? Think of it like a new credit card they mail to you in the mail. It can't be used until you do what?
Activated.
So you activate it. Yeah, I got the credit card and here's the number and it's pretty and it's shiny and I can show it off, but it's completely useless until I activate it. Does that help everybody? Okay. And the way you activate it as a provisional broker is to, can I show the question again, please? Yes. The way you activate a license as a provisional broker is to go and have a broker in charge say that they are willing to supervise you, because provisionals can't be active without a broker in charge. Okay. Everybody all right with that? Now, notice something else I did there. I said, and it's here on the slide, it says, who has to have a BIC in order to be active?
Provisional broker.
Provisional broker.
Provisional brokers. Does it say all brokers have to have a BIC to be active?
No.
No. Well, then that must mean it's not true that all brokers need to have a BIC. Are there some brokers who can be active without a BIC? So here's a different question. Can a licensee be active with no broker in charge?
Yes.
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 If they are non-provisional.
The answer is yes. As long as the licensee has what kind of a license?
Non-provisional.
A
Non-provisional.
non-provisional license. Non-provisional brokers do not need a BIC in order to be active. Well, and what did we say active gets you again? What's the advantage of being active? You can get what?
Paid.
Paid. So here's the follow-up question. And notice how these things build on each other. Can a licensee be paid compensation with no broker in charge? What's the answer to that question?
Yes, as long as they're non-professional.
Yes, as long as they're non-provisional.
Provisional.
Because a provisional broker can't be paid without a broker in charge, because if a provisional broker doesn't have a broker in charge, what's their license status going to be?
Inactive.
They're going to be inactive, and you can't be paid for work you do while you are inactive. You see how all that sort of builds on each other with one simple rule?
Yeah.
Okay. So that one simple rule, just saying that provisional brokers have to have a broker in charge to be active, gives us a bunch of different potential questions on the test. So you need to understand how that rule really affects us. So look at this question right here, because we sort of just had this discussion. Patricia is a provisional broker who takes a listing for her firm, New Heights Real Estate, on May 15th. It says the property goes under contract and closes on July 2nd. Okay, so if we're kind of looking at this thing like a timeline here, okay, we take the listing on May 15th. Okay, and then we're going forward in time. And then here it says the property goes under contract and it closes on July 2nd. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Patricia forgets to take her required continuing education. By the way, when was her continuing education deadline? It didn't give us that, but let's throw that in this timeline here. You should know when that deadline is. When is her continuing education deadline?
June 10th.
June 10th, right? The CE deadline for everybody is June 10th. If she didn't take her continuing education by June 10th, do we have a problem?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, because she is going to fall to what status because she has not completed the required
Inactive.
She's going to fall to inactive status. So a couple things have to happen the moment she falls inactive. Number one, she's got to stop working. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
She cannot. Now, here's going to be the problem. Does the transaction stop just because her license went inactive?
No.
No, this buyer is still under contract. They still want to move toward closing. And even bigger question, does the firm still represent this client?
Yes.
Yes. So who's going to have to step in and assign a new licensee to pick up the slack and take over this transaction and get it across the finish line?
The inactive agent.
The broker in charge is going to have to assign somebody, right? Whether it's themselves or somebody else in the firm. Can Patricia tag along with that person after her license goes inactive?
No.
Can she talk to the client at all?
No.
Not at all. Not until she fixes this problem. Does that make sense for everybody? Mm-hmm. Now, she hasn't violated license law by not taking her CE. She just hasn't kept up with her stuff. But if she talked to that client after she fell inactive, would she be violating license law?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
So it says the property goes under contract and closes on July 2nd, but her license went inactive on July 1. So we got July 1 right here, inactive status, because that's the way it works. You don't go inactive June 11th. It's July 1. that you actually go inactive. Okay? So we've got a problem right here. And here's the question. Can Patricia be paid for her work on this transaction? That's what we want to know the answer to. Can Patricia be paid? So look at the first question here. Can New Heights Real Estate choose to pay Patricia the sales commission on this transaction? Yes or no? What do you think?
Yes.
No.
And the answer is yes. And here's the reason. They could pay her for work she did while what?
Active status.
While
active.
Everybody with me on that? Now, the second question seems like the first, but it is different. Are they required to pay her?
No.
No.
No, because the broker in charge could simply say, because you were not active for the entirety of the transaction, we're not going to compensate you at all. They could say no. They could pay her. Now, here's what I want to point out to you, because this is what they're going to do to you on the test. What if I changed one simple thing about this scenario? What if I said Patricia attended the closing on July 2nd?
She could not be paid.
Would that change the answer to question number one right there? If I had said she attended the closing on July 2nd, would that change the answer to question number one?
Yes.
Absolutely. Because now she would have violated license law by showing up at that closing. Right. And once you violate license law, you can't be compensated at all. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes against the law to compensate you. Oh, by the way, let me dig one deep. Could the firm be paid?
Yes.
If Patricia showed up at that closing?
Oh.
Think about agency and how agency works. When one person on the team F's up, who pays the penalty?
The firm.
The BIC.
Everybody pays the penalty. So if Patricia shows up at that closing on July 2nd, is the firm going to earn any compensation whatsoever in that transaction?
No.
No, because the firm would have sent an inactive agent to the closing. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. So it's a big deal how you handle these situations. Do you think it's really important for a broker in charge to pay really close attention to things like the CE deadline and who's taking their classes and who has not taken their classes, and start yelling at people in advance of the deadline if they haven't taken their classes? Yeah, because you put the firm in jeopardy if you don't do it. Everybody all right with that that little scenario there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, good.
I was just wondering, when you said that once you become inactive, that means you can't be in the transaction or like be part of the transaction whatsoever. You need to stop working immediately.
Yep.
Or you violate license law.
License law, correct. That's exactly right. You cannot continue to work in the transaction once your license is on inactive status. You can't do it. Okay. I'm not hearing background noises. Y'all, it's weird today. Y'all are saying you're having Zoom issues, and I'm not seeing any. And
I'm not hearing anything. Were you just hearing my typing, maybe?
I mean, it could. I mean, like I said, it could be Zoom and the internet, but I'm not getting any of that on my end.
Hey, I think the issue is right now, especially Wake County, all of the schools are all online. So I think everybody in the county is using the internet.
Maybe just all lagging with the demand.
Yeah, well, it was weird. Just like what Kate said, mine legitimately like cut off and restarted itself.
Oh.
I can't get the printer to print out these slides at all to save my life.
Oh, interesting. It's just a technology day. Woohoo! It's a technology day. So next sort of topic here. Who needs a broker in charge? Well, we've already established one category of people who absolutely need a broker in charge. And what category of people is that?
Provisional.
Provisionals, that's an absolute yes. Definitively, provisional broker, you can't do a thing in the world with that license if you don't have a broker in charge. If you do have a broker in charge, you can do pretty much anything with a license that is provisional. But if you don't have a broker in charge, you're not doing anything. So really, this is for non-provisionals. This discussion is for non-provisional people. And again, remind me, what's the difference between a provisional and a non-provisional? Are provisionals just cooler people? Or, I mean, like, what changes you from provisional to non-provisional?
Taking the 3 30-hour courses, post-license courses.
20 hours.
Post-licensing. Once you finish post-licensing, you are no longer provisional. Correct?
Correct.
Yes, Travis. Yep. So, where it says you take the 330-hour courses, isn't it within the 18 months? But if they don't take it all within that 12 months, which is June 10th.
Post-licensing has nothing to do with continuing education.
Okay.
They're two separate things.
Two separate things.
Oh, yeah, and you have to differentiate that.
Okay, so post-licensing is 18 months. Continuing education is every 12 months.
Technically, post-licensing is as long as you want. You have forever to take your post-license.
Oh, I thought, well, where did I get the 18 months?
Because there is an 18-month rule. Notice I said technically, you have forever to take your post-licensing. Here's what the rule actually says. You can only practice as a provisional broker for up to 18 months. After that, you have to be non-provisional or you can't use your license. So if you're not using your license, do you need to bother taking post-licensing? Right? You don't need to. So if you get out there and you never activate your license as a provisional broker, I see people all the time, you know, oh, I got to finish my post-licensing class. My deadline's next month. Oh, okay, well, where's your license hung? Oh, I never hung my license. Well, then what the hell are you doing? Why are you in a rush? Because here's the thing, and here's what you need to understand. What if they are a provisional broker and they don't have their license hung, what license status are they in already?
Inactive.
Inactive. What's the penalty for a provisional broker who has not completed their post-licensing within 18 months?
Their license is inactive.
They go in, they're already there. They're already there. They're already inactive. They're inactive by choice. So there's no push for them to take post-licensing. See, that's the other thing you need to understand about these rules. Nobody is telling you have to take post-licensing in 18 months. They're saying if you want to continue using your license, then you have to take post-licensing within the first what?
18 months.
18 months.
So you could be a provisional indefinitely.
That's right. You can be a provisional broker for the next 20 years if you want to be, but you're only going to be able to actually use your license as a provisional broker for the first what?
18 months.
18 months. After that, you've still got a license, but you can't use it until you finish that post-licensing. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can only use them if you hung them with the BIC.
That's right. That's right. As a provisional broker, you can only use it if you've hung it with a BIC, and you can only do that for the first 18 months. After that, you have to have finished your post-licensing.
Is it 18 months from the day it gets issued or the day you hang, like when you activate with your BIC, that's when your 18 months starts?
No, your 18 months starts the moment your license is issued. When you pass the license exam and it says result pass, the clock's running.
Okay.
Okay, so from the date that we receive it, you pass the test, you receive the, your license. You have 18 months to get your take your post license in order to become a non-provisional. So what part?
But only, Charlene, only if you actually are using the license
your license.
Anyway, if you're not using it, there's no need to take post-licensing.
Okay, so that's the next part. If you're not using it and you don't take your post-license within the 18 months, after 24 months, you actually have to go back and retake your class.
No, you never have to go back. There's never any punishment for not taking a class. You know what the big whopping punishment is for not taking classes? When you finally decide you want to get around and you want to use your license, guess what they're going to tell you to do?
You can't use it because you're inactive.
But what are you have to do to get back to active?
Yeah, you have to do the continuing education.
You just have to take the classes you missed.
Okay.
So you only take education after you get your license if you want to maintain what status?
Active. Okay.
Status. If you're already on inactive status, you are wasting your time and money by taking classes.
I'm telling you, I was so confused. I was like, what am I talking about?
That's why we go through this. That's why we go through this. Because y'all want to make it sound like Darth Vader shows up on the 18-month deadline and hits you with a lightsaber because you didn't take post-license. It doesn't work that way. I mean, the real estate commission is just going to send you a letter that says, stop using your license. And you're going to go, joke's on you. I was already not using my license. So, I mean, that's it. That's literally, but does it matter to somebody who is using their license? If somebody has it active and they have it hung with a BIC and they're actively working transactions, is it important to that person to finish their post-licensing in 18 months?
Yes.
Yes, because if they don't finish, then the minute they hit that 18-month deadline, their license goes inactive and they have to stop work. Is everybody following a little bit better on that now?
I am now.
Okay. Are we all good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
good.
the 18 months is on the exact date, 18 months from the date you was licensed.
That's right. That's exactly right. It is individual to you for post-licensing. Okay. The date you are licensed. So let's talk about and Lucci said that's the status of her friend. She's got a friend who got a license for years but didn't use it. And that's fine. You can do that forever. In fact, there's only one thing you do need to do to keep your license forever in North Carolina. What is that one thing that is non-negotiable that everybody has to do?
Pay your dues on June 30th.
Pay the renewal fee by June 30th every year, $45. That's it. And that, by the way, what is your license status? If you do not pay the renewal fee, it's not inactive.
Expired.
Your license is expired. Charlene, that's the one you're talking about that can you lose your license. If you are expired for 24 months, then it's like you've never had a real estate license. So if you want to keep your real estate license for the rest of your life, all you got to do is put on your calendar by June 30th every year, pay $45, and you'll never lose it once you got it. I mean, some people could be cynical and say they just want the money. I would never say something like that, but you could. Want it.
Some lady said on the phone, it's the cheapest license. I'm going to keep it till I die.
That's it. That's it. Okay. And that's exactly what you do, Lucci. You just keep renewing. That's right. You keep renewing. So non-provisional brokers, do they need a BIC or do they not need a BIC? So let's talk about the practical question here first.
They need a BIC.
Well, maybe or maybe not.
Well, if they're active.
They want to be compensated.
No. See, there you go.
Provisional, not non-provisional.
You're not listening to what we're talking about. Provisional brokers need a BIC, but non-provisional brokers what?
Do not.
Do not need a BIC to be active. That doesn't mean that they might not want to have a BIC. They have to make a choice. You can't learn this as right or wrong. It doesn't work that way. There's scenarios. There are going to be plenty of people who choose not to have a BIC. And to understand that, you got to get to the why they chose not to have a BIC. What is the practical reason why would somebody choose not to have a BIC but still remain active?
Want to be their own boss.
The money.
Wants all the commission to them.
They want the money. They want the money. That's why they would choose to do it. They would choose to do it that way because as long as they have a BIC, isn't it a reasonable assumption that their broker in charge is going to keep some of the money?
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense for everybody?
Mm-hmm. Because of this split.
So, because BICs don't usually work for free. They're not going to supervise you for free. Does that make sense? Are we clear on that?
Yes.
So then the natural next question then is, then why the heck would anyone choose to have a BIC?
They need somebody to guide them.
That's the natural next question. Well, obviously there's one group of people that doesn't have a choice. And who are they?
Provisional.
Provisional brokers. But let's talk about those non-provisionals. Why might they choose to have a BIC anyway, even though they don't need one under the law?
Liability.
Accountability.
They need bigger.
Liability.
Liability protection.
Protection. That's not.
Take some of the restrictions off that there are if you don't have a BIC.
Thank you, Daniel. See, some of y'all are too nice. Oh, liability. Oh, the training. It's wonderful. Y'all don't think like business people yet. It's all about the Benjamins, folks.
Yeah.
People choose to have a BIC because they can make more money with a BIC. Even though they're paying their BIC some of their money, they choose to do that because they can make more of it with a BIC. And Daniel hit the nail on the head. He said there are restrictions on your license when you don't have a BIC. And there are, what kind of restrictions are there on your license when you do have a BIC, Daniel? How about none?
None.
None. If you have a BIC, what kind of real estate can you practice?
Everything.
Everything.
Anything. If you don't have a BIC, the list is very limited. So, can a non-provisional broker choose not to have a BIC?
Yes.
Yes. But they are going to be very what?
Limited
in what they can do. Is everybody with me on that?
Yes.
So let's talk about what those limitations are. Let's talk about what the limitations are for brokers who choose not to have a BIC. Here are some of the limitations, okay? If you don't have a BIC, you can't have anybody working with you. You got to work by yourself. So no BIC, no coworkers. Can you have a personal assistant?
Yes.
No coworkers. Can you have a personal assistant?
No.
No. If you don't have a BIC, you can't even hire an assistant. Work by yourself without a BIC. Is that a big restriction already, right away? Is that a big restriction? Do you think if somebody is a successful real estate broker, they may find it necessary to hire somebody to help them with silly stuff, just like putting up signs?
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? If you don't have a BIC, you're on your own. You're not allowed in any way, shape, or form to hire any help if you don't have a BIC. That's rule number one. Is everybody with me on that? Okay, you can't affiliate anybody with you. You can't team up with anybody else. You can't find yourself another agent and say, "Ooh, we're going to work together." Nope, you work by yourself if you don't have a BIC. That's the first one. If you don't have a BIC, you can't hold money in a trust account. No money in a trust account. So, no BIC, no trust. Well, listen, a lot of people will say, that's fine. I don't want to have a trust account. Are there certain types of real estate where you don't have a choice, though?
Yeah.
If I'm going to be a property manager and handle things like security deposits, do you think I'm going to have a trust account?
Yes.
Yes.
If I sell timeshares, do I have to have a trust account to put that money in?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, are there going to be types of real estate that come off the table instantly the minute I say I don't have a BIC, because then I don't have the right to have a trust account? Is everybody with me on that? So, pretty much, if you don't have a BIC, you can't handle people's money. That's another limitation if you choose not to have a BIC. But both of those things, folks, absolutely pale in comparison to number 3 down there. Look at what you cannot do if you do not have a broker in charge. You cannot what?
Get business.
Advertise or market yourself, your services, property in any way.
Well, then how can you? How can you do anything then?
Good luck.
Great job.
Just take it in the wall.
Good luck. So now I'm going to ask you the same questions I asked a second ago. Why would somebody choose to not have a BIC but remain active? Well, the answer is still the same. They want to keep all the money. But when you ask the question now of then why the heck would anybody choose to have a BIC, does it make sense now why most of us choose to have a broker in charge?
Yeah.
Because it is very hard to imagine how you could do much of anything useful with your real estate license without hitting at least one of those 3 things.
Okay, Travis, I have a question for you.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Okay, so say you're married and your wife knows you have a real estate license and she tells everybody on Facebook, hey, my husband has a real estate license. If you want to save some money, call him. Is that kind of skirting the rules and just fine?
You know, I don't know how the commission would treat that. I really don't. I think that's a gray area. I think they would probably frown upon it. I'm not sure exactly how they would handle it. I'm going to put it to the side and say, it's the kind of thing I wouldn't do, especially because it's so easy to have a broker in charge. But I don't know that there's a definitive answer on something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. How about a business card? Could I have a business card?
No. No, that's part of the advertising.
You have them, but you can't pass them out.
Sharon saying you could have them, you just have to look at them yourself. You can't give them to anybody. That's a good point, Sharon. I guess you could have them. You just can't
just nonchalantly drop them.
So these are examples that the commission gives us of advertising. And so all of these things trigger the need for having a broker in charge, having a business card, even just having like an email signature that says licensed real estate broker. Is somebody who doesn't have a BIC, would it still be true for them to put in their email licensed real estate broker? Even if they don't have a BIC, is that a true statement?
Yes.
Yeah, they are a licensed real estate broker, but they can't put it on their email unless they have a broker in charge, because that's considered a form of marketing. So you can't put signs out in front of property. You can't put yourself on social media and say, call me, I'd love to sell you a house. No, in a vacuum. Is it possible for, let's just say that Sharon gets her license and she has taken all her post-licensing classes, so she's non-provisional. Could she put her license on active status without a BIC at that point in time if she wanted to?
Yes.
Yes. Could she, in theory, represent a client and be paid for that?
Yes.
Yes. as long as she didn't do any of those three things. Now, let me give you an example of the kind of people who do this. There are some people who people just come to them. You know, I had a lady in class actually earlier this week in the CE class, and she said, oh yeah, I just helped my sister buy a house. I've had my license 20 years and it's the first transaction I've ever done. And I said, really? Cool, good for you. And she said, yeah, and I got to keep all the money. I said, did you? She said, yeah, because I don't have a broker in charge. And she said, but my sister got ready to buy this new construction house over in Wake Forest. It's like $600,000. And she called me. She said, do you still have a real estate license? And I said,
Yes,
yeah,
I do.
I still got one. And she said, well, listen, I'm about to buy a house. Do you want to be my agent? And the lady said, sure. So she had not done a transaction in 20 years, but she had stayed up to date on her CE. She showed up at the builder's office with her sister, and she got paid like a $15,000 commission.
Nice.
And she got to keep it all.
Did she reveal it was her sister?
I'm sorry?
Did she reveal that it was her sister?
Yeah, she told the builder, I'm sure, that it was her sister, and it was clear about all those things. But here's the thing. That's a really unlikely transaction, right? Not many of us come across a transaction where somebody just calls us out of the blue and says, hey, don't you have a real estate license? Most of the time, how do we end up with clients? Because we put ourselves out there. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you're putting yourself out there, you got to have a BIC for that.
Got it.
Okay? Because your BIC has to approve your advertising. So the why of why people choose to have a BIC is it basically takes all the restrictions off. It opens up the doors so that they can do any type of real estate that they want to without restriction. And that's why most of them. Now, once you do have a BIC, a couple things you need to know. Once you have a BIC, once you've made that choice to have a broker in charge, and could that, as a side question, since I'm keeping side questions over here, let's ask this one. Can I be my own BIC?
Yes.
What do you think?
And
yes.
Absolutely.
You have to take the 12 hours.
Absolutely.
If you are not
Well, aren't you your own BIC, Travis?
I am my own BIC. That's exactly right. I am my own BIC. So when we say you have to have a BIC, don't rule out that could be who?
You.
Yourself. That's exactly right. As long as you meet the criteria, you can be your own broker in charge. And honestly, the criteria is not that great. It's not like it's insurmountable to become a broker in charge. I mean, Seth meets the criteria. If he wanted to become his own broker in charge tomorrow, he could.
I have no idea.
He meets.
Not that I want to.
That gives him the idea now.
He could take your place if you had to be out, but he would have to at least take the 12 hours course within a certain time frame, isn't it?
He could take my place because he meets the criteria, right? I could make him BIC of my firm,
right? And he could take the 12 hours later.
I don't know about all of that now, but you know, yeah, I don't know if we're gonna go that far, but it could happen. Yes. But so don't forget in this whole discussion that when we say, do you have to have a BIC, that it could be yourself, right? This is one of the newest rules that we have. And so I would say this would be a good target to show up on the license law exam. It says all transaction related documents. So give me a list of things that we might have that we've already talked about that would be transaction related documents that we might have potential buyers and sellers sign during the course of a transaction. What's the very first document that we ask somebody for their signature on
working with real estate?
Agency agreement.
Working with real estate.
Even before an agency agreement, there's one.
Working with real estate.
The working with
if
real
you are
estate
active.
brochure. Is that a transactional related document?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And notice what it says right here. It says it must be turned into your broker in charge no later than 3 calendar days after the document is signed and in your possession. So if Seth had held an open house on Sunday and he had 3 people come to the open house and they all signed the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure, he would have had to, by rule, give me a copy of those Working with Real Estate Agents brochures by yesterday, because Monday would have been day 1, Tuesday would have been day 2, and Wednesday would have been day 3. And this is actually a really good week to use as an example. Why did I count Monday even though it was Labor Day? What does this rule say?
Calendar days.
It says 3 calendar days. It doesn't care if there's holidays in there. So I would say this is probably a good, I would put a star beside this rule just because it's so new. We've always had a rule that said we had to turn documents into the broker in charge, but the old rule said within a reasonable time, which is sort of a joke in our industry, because when you tell real estate agents they have to do something by a reasonable time, the real estate commission, I mean, they actually had somebody last year, I'm not kidding, this is what prompted the rule change. They had an agent get disciplined and they brought them up on charges that they were not turning documents into their broker in charge. And the commission said, you've got transactions from 2 years ago that your broker in charge doesn't have records of. And the agent said, I'm getting there, be reasonable. I mean, you stop rushing me. And so they found out they couldn't discipline them because the rule was so wishy-washy. It just said turn them in within a reasonable amount of time. Well, could a reasonable amount of time be very different from one person to the next?
Yes. Obviously.
Yeah, obviously. So they had to come back and tighten down the rule, and so now it says specifically 3 calendar days. 3 calendar.
I have a question, Travis.
Go for it, Yusra.
So you said customer, when they sign the working brochure, do they have to sign it or just write their names? And when they refuse to sign, we have to return it to the broker in charge or no?
Yes, because you still keep a copy even if they refuse to sign it. You would simply write refuse to sign on there. And so that's what
you have to document it. You showed it to them.
You turn into your broker in charge whatever you have. And if they refuse to sign it, you write on there, refuse to sign, and then you turn that into your broker in charge.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, absolutely. So because that's such a new rule, I would think it would be a good target candidate to be
Travis, Sharon had asked a question really fast. It said, can you be a BIC but choose to hang your license with a firm that has a BIC?
You can, indeed, Sharon. So Leslie, who came in with us, was it this week or last week?
I think it was last week.
Last week. When Leslie came in, Leslie is a broker in charge, but she chooses to hang her license with my firm. So you can have many BICs within a firm, but only one BIC of the firm. Okay.
Would that be like the big Keller Williams offices that have like multiple teams inside of each office?
Exactly, Lisa. When you have those big offices that have teams within the office, usually the team leaders are BICs of their little team, so they supervise their own little team, but then they all are under the supervision of the big broker in charge who's over the whole office. So people on those teams usually have more than one broker in charge. They would have like their team leader would be a broker in charge. And then, so Leslie has 2 brokers in charge. Herself and me.
You. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's fine. You can have as many brokers in charge as you want as a non-provisional broker, as long as you have the permission. And it doesn't even have to be written permission. It can be oral permission, shockingly, of all of your brokers in charge. As long as you have the oral permission of all of your BICs, you can be affiliated with more than one firm.
So if within the 3 days then of turning, would she still have to turn in her stuff to you, or?
Yes, she does. Because
so here's the ultimate accountability.
Right. I still have accountability for everything that the firm does. When she's taking on clients, she's doing it in the name of my firm. And so I still have to have accountability for those documents. And this is where we couldn't have had this rule even 10 years ago, because when we were still dealing in, paper, there was just no way to turn in all this. I mean, because you've always got agents that are strung out all across the world. I mean, notoriously real estate agents had the file cabinet in their trunk, with all the files in it and everything. But now everything's digital. So it becomes much easier to send documents to your broker in charge. I mean, when I ran a big firm, what I told all my agents to do was, all you got to do is, when you're getting your clients to sign these things electronically anyway, all you have to do is CC me on the digital signatures. When the signature package comes back, have me as copied, and you don't even have to do an extra step. When it comes back to you, it comes to me, and we both got a copy, and we're good to go. So it really isn't that hard with digital paperwork. So here's a type of question you might see on the license exam. It says, John is a licensed non-provisional broker who's not affiliated with a broker in charge, nor has he declared himself a sole proprietor broker in charge. So that's a lot of language just to say John doesn't have a what?
BIC.
A BIC, okay? He doesn't have a BIC. His best friend, Amy, approaches him with a desire to sell her home and asks John to help. What can John legally do for Amy? Okay, so he's non-provisional, he's active, he doesn't have a BIC. His best friend approaches him and wants his help in selling her property. So can he list her property for sale? What do you think the answer to that question is?
No.
No.
I would say the answer to that question is probably no. Even though she approached him and he didn't have to do any marketing to get the client, what is she asking him to do?
To list it, to put it out there so others can see it.
To advertise it, right? To market it. She's asking him to market property for her. He can't do that if he doesn't have a what?
Broker in charge.
A BIC. And so the reason I say no is no BIC.
No advertising.
No advertising. And no advertising means no listing. I mean, he can't put a sign out in front of it. He can't put it in the newspaper. He can't put it on Facebook. He can't put it in the MLS. How's he going to tell somebody it's for sale?
He can only advise her.
Yeah, I mean, he could give her advice, but we kind of need, I mean, what we think a buyer's just going to go by and go, I'm getting a good vibe that this one might be for sale. Let me just call and check just to see if this one might be. It's not, that's not going to work.
Well, how are they even going to call? They don't have any number to call.
Well, that's right. Who would they call? Because you can't put your number out there, because that would be advertising too. So I would say he cannot list her property for sale. Can he do something for her though?
Advise her.
He could advise her. What else could he do? And this is why. And this is the one thing that keeps people on active status without a BIC. Could he refer her? Could he refer her to an agent who does have a BIC?
Yes.
Who could list the property for sale and then pay him a referral fee?
Yes.
Absolutely. And that would be probably the most likely course of action here, is that he would refer her, this friend of his to another agent. And so the vast majority, if you talk to the vast majority of agents who don't have a broker in charge and you say, well, why do you still have a license? They will say to you, well, I'm a referral only agent. Does that make sense to you now, what they mean? Basically, what they're saying is, I'm just keeping my license on active status so I can still be paid what?
Referral fee.
Referral fees. If people come to me, I can still be paid these referral fees because I didn't have to advertise for that. I didn't have to market for that. I didn't have to do anything like that. Usually you have the slides, or you should. Okay.
So without the referral, she would have been better off in the FISBO.
Right. If he was going to try to help her without marketing her property, she'd have probably been better off as a FSBO. Now, there are weird things he could do for her, like if she already had an offer and she just needed his advice about, like, is this a good offer? He could do those kinds of things, but actually listing the property for sale, no. Yeah, he would need to refer her for that. Okay?
He could help her price it.
He could help her price it, yeah, for sure. And then if she wanted to do the marketing herself. And we already answered this question. Can John refer Amy to another broker who will list the property and pay a referral fee? And that is absolutely what?
Yes.
Yes, he can. As long as his license is on active status and he is referring to somebody else on active status, absolutely. No question.
Do you have to be active to refer anyone, or do you have to be active to refer anyone and get paid?
You have to be active to refer and get paid. You can do anything you want to as long as you do it for free. Remember that the basic rule for licensure says you're not doing, the basic rule for licensure says none of these rules apply to you unless you're doing a real estate related service for somebody other than yourself and you're being what?
Paid
for it. Don't forget that most basic of rules. Always remember the golden rule, which is if you are doing a real estate related service, you don't necessarily need a license. If you're doing a real estate related service for somebody else, you don't necessarily need a license. But if you're doing a real estate related service for somebody else and you're being paid for it, you do need a license. And so is referring somebody a real estate related service?
Yes.
Yes.
And is he referring himself or is he referring somebody other than himself?
Someone other than himself.
He's referring somebody other than himself, and is he being paid for it?
Yes.
Yes. And in that case, he needs a license, and it needs to be on what status?
Active.
Active status. Good.
But not even necessarily paid. It can be just compensated, right?
Yeah, any type of compensation, anything of value. Yeah, anything of value. Okay. Look at this question. This is where you can't just try to memorize things specifically without applying all of what you know. It says Samuel's a non-provisional broker whose license is on active status, though he's not affiliated with a broker in charge, including himself. He is only paid referral fees. So far, so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's only paid referral fees as he refers all real estate activities to other brokers in the state. He maintains a public website named sellrdu.com where people can ask for information about the value of their home, and Samuel refers all of these questions to other active brokers. Is his website within North Carolina Real Estate Commission rules?
No.
What
No.
say you?
No, because it's advertising.
A big, fat, whopping no. And the reason is this is advertising. This is marketing. And you cannot advertise or market unless you have what?
A BIC.
Broker in charge.
Mm-hmm.
A broker in charge. Good. Good. All right, so let's talk about somebody that you might bring on board once you do have a BIC, that unlicensed salaried employee that you may bring into your office once you have. Remember, you can't have one of these people unless you have a broker in charge. But once you do have a broker in charge, you can potentially hire a salaried employee. Now, the key here is unlicensed. If you want to hire a licensed person, what could a licensed employee do as far as real estate goes?
Anything.
Anything. They're licensed, right? If they're licensed and their license is on active status, there's not going to be any restrictions at all on the services they can perform. But if they're unlicensed, there are going to be some limited things that we allow the unlicensed assistant of a real estate broker or agent to do in North Carolina. You know, things like taking phone calls. Look at this one right here. This is one that's going to show up on the license exam, and people miss it every single time.
Why?
Can an unlicensed person enter a listing in the MLS?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, they can. They can't create the listing. They can't come up with the verbiage, the facts, the language, the research. Who has to do all of that?
The broker.
The broker.
The broker, the person who has a license. But if the broker basically hands their unlicensed assistant a folder and says, here's everything that needs to go in the MLS, put 123 Main Street on the market, can an unlicensed person do that?
Yes.
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 Mm-hmm.
Yes.
As long as it's exactly what the broker gave them.
Correct. Exactly. So like as an example, if I have an unlicensed assistant, I can't say to them, won't you write something up, a description about 123 Main Street and put it in there on the MLS? You're good at writing. I cannot say that to an unlicensed person. But could I hand them a paragraph that says, beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath home situated on pristine 3/4 of an acre on Lockmere Lake in beautiful Cary? Could I hand them that specific information and say, here, put this in the MLS?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. There's a difference.
Can you have them to proofread it?
You could have them proofread it for like editing, syntax and grammar and those kinds of things. But ultimately, they can't just create it on their own.
Create it themselves. Okay.
They just
can't create their verbiage.
Okay. So they can do like research for you as long as you verify that it's correct. They can put signs out. They can put lock boxes on the door. An unlicensed person can do all of that for a broker. They can schedule repairs. Like a lot of property managers have unlicensed assistants that work for them and would deal with scheduling repairs. They can show up and supervise the repairs. Act as a courier just means deliver money and contracts. So can they take deposits down to the bank and put them in the trust account?
Mm-hmm. No.
Yep.
Oh, they can?
Sure can.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking their account. You're right.
No, not in their account. Trust account. Yeah. Trust account. Yep, they can do that. They can do that. They can schedule appointments for the broker to go on. So like showing appointments, they can set them up. They can call and make arrangements for that. They can confirm them. They can do all of those things. They can even fill in forms as long as, again, they are given the information. They can't create the forms. They can't just write up a listing, for example. But as long as they are not expected to do any creating the information, that all they have to do is sort of fill in the blanks with stuff that they're handed, they can do that. They can type stuff up as long as we give them the information to put in there.
Hey, can you go back? I'm trying to write these down since I can't get it.
Sure. Okay.
I have a question.
Basically, any sort of office-related administrative tasks are within the control of a unlicensed assistant. You can. You don't have to have them do it, but you can if you want to. The big key here is that whoever employs them, the broker that employs them, is going to be responsible for everything that they do. Now, a big one, deposit money, we already talked about. How about if we just said, like cutting commission checks? Could you have could you have an unlicensed assistant who was your bookkeeper, who was handling all the money in your office?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How about even managing your trust account? Could you have an unlicensed person do that for you?
Yes.
Yes.
You could. You would just be responsible for it. So be careful about that. You're putting a lot of faith in that person's hand, because the real estate commission is not going to hold the unlicensed person responsible. They're going to hold the licensee responsible. So there really are a lot of things that an unlicensed salaried assistant can do on behalf of a broker who employs them. There's there's really two types of big no-nos when it comes to unlicensed assistants. Things that they cannot do. They cannot hold an open house. In fact, they can't show property that is for sale at all. So no showing property for sale. That's a no-no. Notice I didn't say no showing property. I said no showing property that is what?
For sale.
For sale.
Sale. Are there other types of properties?
Rentals.
Rental.
For rent.
Do you think they can show them?
Yes.
Yes, they can. They can show rental property. Unlicensed assistants can show rental property, but they cannot show property that is for sale. They can't basically make any negotiations. They cannot engage in any negotiations. They can just give facts. They can't be paid referral fees. They can't be paid bonuses. Oh, you sold that person, we're going to give you a bonus. None of that's allowed if you don't have a license. Look at this one right here. This is one they might test you on. I would say pay attention to that one right there. And just forget the cold calling part. Just how about reach out to prospects, period, and solicit business. Can you have, of all the stuff they can do, now an unlicensed assistant can manage your trust account. They can put stuff in the MLS for you. They can put your signs up. They can go over and they can show your listings that are for rent. They can do all of that. But could you have them stand outside the grocery store and give out your business card? What do you think?
Nope.
No.
No, because it says that they cannot what?
Solicit business.
Solicit business. An unlicensed person is not allowed to solicit business in North Carolina. And that's a good way to put it, Michael, to act as a salesperson, to act as they don't have a license for that. So if you want them to solicit business for you, you better send them to go get licensed.
So if they're talking to somebody like and say, oh yeah, I work for so-and-so, you should give them a call. Would that count?
I think that's probably, I think it's going to really depend on what the lead into that moment was. You know, if it was a more natural conversation where they were, you know, having a longer term conversation and somebody said, you know, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, I work for the Billy English real estate firm. Oh, well, we've been thinking about selling our house. Well, you should give us a call. I think the real estate commission will be fine with that. But I think that's dramatically different than standing out in front of the grocery store going, you know, hey, you thinking about buying and selling a house today? We'd love to talk to you about, you know, like where you're actively like, you know, hitting people up for business. They would have a real problem with that. Okay. Are we all good on what an unlicensed assistant can and cannot do?
Yeah.
Good.
Soliciting business basically because like it's kind of classified as advertisement and they're not even licensed or have active status.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I'll tell you what it has more to do with. The natural progression of the conversation when you're trying to solicit business is to, well, what can you do for me? What can you offer me? And what are you going to charge me? And the Real Estate Commission does not want an unlicensed person to be in that discussion. If the conversation is going to move on to, commissions and what we're going to, what services we're going to provide and what the charge is going to be, then that should be the licensed person having that discussion. And so this is just a way to prevent the conversation from going too far. It's just easier to say no solicitation.
Okay.
If you don't have a license. All right, so why don't we do this? It's 10:15. Let's take a break. Come back at 10:25, and we're going to talk about the broker in charge rule and the broker in charge and eligibility to become a broker in charge. Okay.
All right.
Come back at 10:25. Recording here and share the screen again. Pick up where we left off. So when we left off, we had talked about like the necessity of a broker in charge, why you might need one. We talked about what an unlicensed assistant might be able to do if you have an unlicensed assistant in the office. And now we want to talk about what it takes to be a broker in charge. So let's say you've decided not only have you decided you need to have a broker in charge, but you've decided that it makes sense for you to be your own broker in charge, or you want to be somebody else's broker in charge. The qualifications are exactly the same. Supervising people is supervising people, whether you just supervise yourself or whether you supervise others. So Leslie is an example of a broker in charge who only supervises herself. I'm an example of a broker in charge who supervises myself plus others. The rules and the requirements are exactly the same to get to that point. So we want to talk about something called BIC eligibility and what those rules are, because they may show up on the test for you about what is required to get to this BIC eligibility. So we're going to talk about the requirements first. Here's what I don't want you to focus on. This slide right here is not so important. You all don't need to worry about the taking of the 12-hour course so much. There is a 12-hour course to become a broker in charge. And you can either take it before you become the broker in charge, or you can take it after you become the broker in charge, as long as you do that within 120 days. But that's not really what I want to focus on for you all as far as the test. Here's what I want to focus on. This is the slide that's going to be important for BIC questions on the test. What are the requirements to declare yourself a broker in charge with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission? The first requirement is probably the easiest to understand. You've got to be non-provisional. Hopefully it makes sense that a BIC cannot be what? Provisional, right? Because you're talking about somebody who needs to be supervised themselves. They certainly cannot supervise others. So the first rule of seeing if you're qualified to be a BIC is, all right, so let's apply this test to Seth as we go. So, I mentioned earlier that I thought he was qualified to be a BIC if that's what he wanted to do. So let's apply these to Seth as we work, since he's a good real life example. He's non-provisional. So does he meet the first requirement to be a broker in charge? If he's a non-provisional broker, does he meet requirement number 1?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Now let's look at the second one. It says the BIC must have been on active status and have been involved in real estate brokerage for 2 full-time years, at least 2 full-time years. And that 2 years has to have come within the last 5 years. In other words, even if he was, could he have a bunch of real estate experience, but it'd be 15 years ago and it's not going to count here?
No.
Right? You see what I'm saying? It's too old. They want recent experience. They want to know, does he have 2 years of recent experience? And so what they define as recent experience is within the last 5 years. This is not saying he has to have 5 years of real estate experience. How much real estate experience does he need?
Two.
It just has to have happened since what year? How far back in time are we going to look to see if he has 2 years of experience?
5 years.
Five.
We're going to look back to 2015. So basically, since 2015, has Seth had an active real estate license for at least 2 years? What's the answer to that question, Seth?
Yes.
Yes, he's had a license. Has it been on active status for at least 2 years since 2015?
Yep.
Okay, so far he meets the criteria. Now, okay, you had a license, it was on active status. Have you been involved in real estate during since 2015 for at least 2 years?
Yes, I have.
Yes. So he's a yes on all of those. Does he meet the criteria then as set out by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission to be declared a broker in charge in this state?
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes, he does. He meets the criteria. Okay, that is the way we decide if someone is qualified to become a broker in charge or not. We simply go down the list and we say, are they non-provisional? Yes. Okay. Have they, within the last 5 years, have they developed at least 2 years of full-time real estate experience as an active real estate agent in the state? And if that's yes, then they are qualified.
It doesn't have to be 2 consecutive years, do it?
It does not. It could be at any time within the last 5 years. So he could have done a year when he first got his license and then took some time off and then did another year later. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
And this last one down here is really not part of the rule, but I throw it in there because for whatever reason, people tend to want to separate it and think, well, no, that doesn't count because for half of that time he was provisional. That time counts too. Any time. Can provisional brokers be on active status?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so your time as a provisional broker where you're active also counts toward this experience. That is still real estate experience as a provisional broker. So if you all have a goal of becoming a broker in charge, what's the fastest you can become a broker in charge from the day you get your real estate license?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years. If you go find a BIC on day one to hang your license with, because you got to get your license to what status before this 2-year clock starts to tick? Active. So if you go find a BIC on day one and get your license activated, your 2-year clock is now running. And notice it doesn't say you have to do 20 transactions. There's no transaction count. Could you have 0 transactions and still meet this rule?
Yes.
You could, because it doesn't define what real estate brokerage is. You could, just working for a real estate school could be real estate brokerage. Handling paperwork in an office could be real estate brokerage. This is a very low bar. It really is. It really is. Okay. Are we all good on the BIC qualifications here? Okay. So 2 years of full-time experience that they picked up within the last 5 years. So whenever you're sending the form in, the Real Estate Commission is only going to look at the 5 years before that. And they're going to see if you were active and full-time for 2 of those. And if you are, you meet the qualification. That's it. That's all. Any question about that? No? Pretty straightforward. This one I think is one that people struggle a little bit more with because we don't talk about this person nearly as much. A qualifying broker. A qualifying broker is different than the broker in charge. Every firm needs a qualifying broker. Every firm needs a qualifying broker. And I'll tell you why. Because every firm needs an owner. A qualifying broker is the owner of the firm. Basically, we have a license law rule that says you can't own a real estate firm unless you have a real estate license. Is that a pretty sensible rule, by the way? Does it make sense that they don't want people who can't get a real estate license owning real estate firms in North Carolina?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here's where you all are going to have a disconnect in your brain because right now, most of you think of the broker in charge as being the person who owns the firm. The broker in charge is just the manager of the firm.
Mm-hmm.
Can we hire a broker in charge to run a firm even if they don't have any ownership of the firm?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure can.
All the time.
We sure, and it happens a lot. It happens a lot, especially in big firms. It happens a lot. The broker in charge is not the owner of the firm. They don't have any ownership of the firm. They are simply hired to manage the firm on a day-to-day basis. The qualifying broker is the owner of the firm. And there's only one requirement to be a qualifying broker, okay? The qualifying broker has to be non-provisional. So can a PB, can a provisional broker own a real estate firm in North Carolina?
No.
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 Yes.
Hey, I think everyone just like
Yeah, everyone's
froze.
like frozen.
Yes,
Or is it just Travis?
Yeah, I think just Travis froze.
Yeah, because I wasn't hearing anybody respond.
I was waiting for an
Seth
answer.
is
I was
frozen
like,
too.
Yeah.
Everybody here?
I was like, what's the answer?
And
Travis is gone.
Everybody with a real estate license can own a firm.
Where is
Travis?
Everybody started changing.
Travis got lost. Travis is done with us.
Where's Waldo?
I am. I'm finished.
I'm like awkwardly laughing.
So
like
now I see what you mean. Those of you that said you would,
thank you.
those
totally
of you
happened
that
to
said
me.
earlier, you know, when you said earlier that your Zoom just restarted, you know, well, mine did now. So I don't.
It's like Travis asked that question, and now he's over us because we didn't answer right.
I thought you was waiting for more answers.
Yeah,
waiting for us to
I don't,
change
it just
it.
literally. Yeah.
It was like pause for dramatic.
Oh,
right.
Sorry about that. I'm back.
Welcome back.
Right.
Right.
It was very many calls for
Non-provisional
drama.
broker.
But thank you. So what does it take for a provisional broker to become non-provisional? Finish their what?
Finish their 30-hour courses.
Licensing.
Again?
I didn't get the answer though to if a non-provisional broker.
Exactly. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were there.
Travis, I didn't get the answer if a non-provisional broker could
If a
own a
non-provisional
firm.
broker what?
Could own a firm.
I thought he said if
Of
a
course, a
provisional
non-provisional. A non-provisional broker can, but a provisional broker cannot. Yeah. A provisional broker cannot own a firm, but a non-provisional broker can, of course, own a firm. So we talked about how easy it is to get from provisional to non-provisional. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to connect the dots and realize if you want to own a firm, there's only one thing you need to actually do. And what is that one thing? Finish your what?
First licensing.
Education.
Hire a bank, renew your yearly.
Finish your post license.
And get 2 years of experience.
Yeah.
Yep. Take post.
Yeah.
Well, John, that's a great point, but not necessarily true. To own a firm, there is no experience requirement. That's to be a what?
That's to be a broker.
That's to be a broker. That's to be a qualified.
That's to be a
There's
broker.
only an experience requirement to be a what? To be a broker in charge.
Broker in charge.
See, this is why I'm going through this. You need to separate in your mind. In your mind, these things need to get separated out. It's not the same thing being a qualifying broker as being a broker in charge. Those are not the same thing.
Hey, Travis, you're breaking up really bad.
They don't have the same rules.
Do you hear me? You're breaking up really bad. Everyone's saying the same thing.
I don't know if it's necessarily just Travis because I heard it on other people too, but
I hear you.
Like you're going in and out, and Seth keeps freezing. I don't know if it's me or everyone's having the same issue. You wanna try to restart?
Everybody's having the same difficulty. Well, I think if it's everybody, it might benefit everybody.
It's sounding good now
that everybody can.
Mine's not glitching in and out.
It's up to y'all. Okay, all right. For me, some of you all are choppy and some of you are fine, but I'm not sure which. I think it seems to be more of a system-wide thing.
Can't hear you
clearly.
Yeah, so you want to restart the Zoom, see if it'll help if everyone restarts?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't just everybody restart, including Seth and I, and we'll see if it gets better. How about that?
Okay.
Okay.
Peace.
See y'all in a minute.
Okay.